We're going to be starting at 10 o'clock. Just want to welcome everyone to our April Know Before You Fly Your Drone workshop. So just bear with us and we'll be starting exactly in a minute. So thank you again for joining us. I appreciate it. Sorry, I'm making a little bit of a noise with my papers. Again, welcome. Welcome, everyone. If you're just joining in, we're going to start exactly at 10 o'clock, which is in 1 minute. So we'll be starting soon. So I appreciate everyone joining us today. We're, again, it's Know Before You Fly Your workshop, sponsored by the North Texas UAS Task Force. This is the initiative for safe practices, and we're going to be speaking with educators today. So this is one of my favorite subjects about drones in the classroom, and we have some amazing panelists. So hang in there. We're going to start now. So again, thank you. Welcome to Know Before You Fly Your workshop. I am so thrilled. My name is Maggie Schuster, and my partners Evan Morelli and Sharon Rossmark are here. And we every month, the first Saturday of every month, we do another workshop. And by the way, just so you know, when you log into northtexasuas.com, you can see our previous workshops that we've done in the past. And there's some great subjects. One of them is preparing for your 107. Another one is with Vic Moss and Kenji about the new ruling. So again, I want to welcome everyone. Basically, I just wanted to tell you that the North Texas UAS Task Force Initiative, this is one of the initiatives, the unmanned air systems, AKA drones, of course. Basically the technology is here. And so with the recent growth of the emerging industry, this has brought the technology to the masses, meaning everyone is starting to get to know drones. And we really want to make sure that there's safe operations throughout the communities. And I'm not just talking about North Texas, but everywhere in the US or beyond. The other thing I want to say is that the workshops that we're doing today are designed to educate and inform all the U.S. pilots, including first-time recreation, as well as commercial professional pilots. And of course, even if you don't fly a drone or you're not in the industry, we want to make sure that everyone, the public, is aware of what's coming up and that you are going to be seeing drones in the area. And with that, I really want to, we really want to stay on schedule today. I really want to introduce the 4 panelists today. All of them are unique and amazing. They have designed and put their own curriculum to drones in the classroom. So I wanted to introduce you, first of all, Scott Buell, then Stevenson DeMorcy, Laquanda's Soup Tree. I hope I said that right, Laquanda. I'm sorry about that. And Hernanda White, and all have a unique perspective again of drones in the classroom. So I'm going to start with Scott. Scott, do you mind doing a quick intro and telling us a little bit about your curriculum? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
I love your drone legends, by the way. I love
Thanks so much. Thank you. That's to the point of, I started Drone Legends on the idea that inside every child, and indeed every one of us, lives a legend. It's that inner unique potential that we all carry. And especially in our young children, our mission is to, as educators, it's our responsibility to help children realize their unique potential. And we do that through the magic of drones, right? This unique tool that engages children. It has this capacity to just attract children. And so we've built a curriculum, a very integrated problem-based curriculum that is aligned to NGSS, ISTE, CSTA, Common Core, Literature, Language Arts, and math, of course. And it encourages teamwork, collaboration. We're using drones as the tool to help children realize their unique character. And it's underpinned through all this social emotional learning. So it's a fun, engaging, very hands-on and inclusive curriculum designed for teachers by teachers.
Awesome. Stevenson, do you mind just introducing yourself real quick and telling us a little bit about your special qualities with your curriculum? You got to unmute. I think you're still unmute. There
Yes,
you
I
go.
was.
Perfect.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Maggie. And North Texas UAS, it's awesome to be here. If you don't mind, Maggie, I will share a screen to give a little visual. So STEAM Ed Drones, we are clearly a STEM or STEAM-based program with an art addition to it. We have little handheld drones that we send into the classroom along with a curriculum or workbook. The workbook gives you an overview of everything that is the drone industry. So we touch on science, we touch on technology, we touch on engineering, arts, and mathematics. When you get down here on our website, you sign up here, and we automatically, MailChimp sends you a free first curriculum. So the first curriculum gives you an overview of what all of our lessons would look like. So we break it down step by step. As you guys know, in the past, when tech companies come into the school system, they don't necessarily present materials for the classroom. So what we do is we break everything down for you in terms of your do now, your lesson and objective, your condition, your behavior, and then we give you all the resources that you need to apply that lesson. So you're not spending 2-3 hours after school or on your prep time when you should be spending it with your family or your loved ones. We do all of that preparation for you. We support you in whatever it is that you're doing, and we outline literally everything that you need to have for the classroom, how to set it up, include the mathematics section, which talks about speed and a bunch of other cool concepts. So if you guys are interested in hearing more, I will, as we are talking right now, add my contact information to the share. You are free to email me or send me a text message. Hotline Bling. Thank you, Maggie, and North Texas UAS.
I really appreciate it. And just for the audience, we're going to have all the information on each and every one of our presenters today so that you can reach out. This is just basically a platform where we're trying to introduce and have you meet some of our great educators today. And then if you have further questions, please reach out to them. Okay, so our next one is Laquanda. Laquanda, do you mind introducing yourself? I would love to hear from you.
Hello, my name is Laquanda Sumter. I am the CEO and founder of Focusing on Me. Focusing on Me is a nonprofit organization that has a STEM initiative, and our STEM initiative right now is STEAM through drones. And then we're also working on a platform called dronesandeducation.org, which is basically a library resource online for teachers to be able to log on to dronesandeducation.org to find resources of programs that are available for bringing drones into the classroom, as well as opportunities such as Mr. Stevenson has, Ms. Urena has, and Scott has. It's basically a one-stop shop is what I call it, of resources that will be available so that you can connect and see what everyone has and resources that are available to bring drones into your classroom. The STEAM Through Drones initiative is where I actually go out and do drone shows for organizations and schools and present drones to the schools and introduce the students to drone technology and the safety about drone technology, as well as offering our after-school program and our online summer program and summer camps as well, where we're actually teaching the electrical components of drones and programming drones as well. If you would like to know more information about our programs, our information is in the chat as well as you can check out dronesandeducation.org and steamthroughdrones.com as well.
That was amazing, Laquanda. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Hernanda, are you there?
Yes, good morning.
Hi.
Hi.
You look amazing.
Hi there. Good morning, everyone. My name is Hernanda White. I'm the founder, CXO, and executive director, along with my esteemed, distinguished panelists in the drone industry. And we provide drone education, drone technology, and drone, the surrounding things around drones, right? We are more on the hardware and the engineering side. We teach coding and projects. We also make sure that the kids our kids are typically from ages, middle school to high school and collegiate. And so we work with these kids primarily from underserved communities at the CTE or high schools that they are in. And we work with kids that are interested, younger, that are interested to get them into the pipeline. Our commitment and growth is based on working with our teachers. So we train the teachers and we bring the drone programs to the students and meeting them where they are. We also take our show on the road, so to speak, sometimes. So we are in different locations. We have kids in Florida, we have girls in New Jersey, we have girls in New York, we have girls in Louisiana, and we're building out a program this summer in Oregon. And so it's an amazing time to teach drones and the engineering and the avionics and the aeronautics and aviation piece, getting them teamed up and prepared and steamed up to go into career and get them tech ready for careers in aviation, aerospace, and those industries. One of our big projects that we're working on now, we like our girls to compete, and we are a competitive bunch. Our girls are high scholars and have an interest and love for what they do. And what we're bringing this year is our first robotics team, and they'll be joining. Thankful to shout out to our folks at Bell Flight. We love you, Ron, and the team at Robotics Events. Thank you so much for your contribution and pouring into us. We are honored, we are blessed to be able to be a all-girls team from a predominantly all-Black high school, Justin Kimball High School, and we will be competing in the robotics competition come November. Our girls have their drones.
That sounds
hardware,
wonderful.
engineering. So we're excited.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point of number one, your students and the age of the students. And even though you're located in Dallas, Fort Worth, it sounds like you extend your program and there's really basically no boundaries. Is that correct?
No boundaries, no limits.
So I wanted to ask a couple of the other panelists, if you don't mind chiming in. Thank you, Hernanda. I appreciate that. Starting with Scott, can you tell me a little bit about the ages for your curriculum, where you're located, and if you have satellite?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're firm believers of teaching within a student zone of proximal development. So we have aligned our curriculum to focus on grades 4 through 6. It can be aged up to the middle school level. But that zone of proximal development is just enough to where students have to stretch to learn, but not so difficult enough to where it becomes discouraging. Okay. So our program is very student led. We're based out of New Jersey, but our curriculum is for teachers by teachers. We offer the full professional development package, lesson plans, online teaching platform, student mission guides. Every mission is based upon a real world drone scenario. The kids function in teams. It's a classroom based and after school based program as well. So really you can bring this into your school. It's 100% turnkey. We provide the whole classroom bundle. You can see it at dronelegends.com/curriculum. But in terms of the age group, definitely within that upper elementary and middle school level.
That sounds great, Scott. What about you, Stevenson? What is the age from, I think from kindergarten, Stevenson, is it to 12th grade? What is it, Stevenson?
I can definitely customize it for you to fit kindergarten through high school to 12th grade. I literally taught all those grades. But the program specifically is tailored for 5th through 9th graders. Okay. That is the window of exploration. So that is our target focus.
That sounds wonderful. And again, is your program regionally based, or can you give this program out like to other schools or teachers that are interested in implementing it, like in Florida or California?
We are I've been traveling the whole America the past 2 years, living in California for a year, getting business mentorship from my awesome mentors. I've been everywhere from Georgia to North Carolina, Charlotte Drone Flying Group, New Jersey, Drone Flying Group. So my network is literally established to give you support anywhere you are within 50 states in America. And we are here for you both in person and online, of course.
That sounds wonderful. Laquanda, can you talk a little bit about the age that your students are, and again, where you're located, and if you can reach out outside your region? Is Laquanda there? Are you there, Laquanda? She's outside, so it might be a little hard for her to hear. I see her in the background. Well, we'll get back. We'll get back to her. One of the questions I want to start with Scott. What do you feel are the biggest challenges working with the drones in the classroom, Scott?
Yeah, I think it's about structure. It's about having a classroom organization and a solid curriculum that accounts for classroom management. You know, we've witnessed drones being brought into the classroom, and it can become very chaotic unless there's some real parameters put around the program. Too many drones in a classroom, not enough structure to the curriculum. You see this a lot of times where it's intriguing to get youngsters involved in drone racing. However, that's very, very challenging. I've experienced that on a few levels. So it's really about classroom management and structure. So providing those guardrails, if you will, and giving the educator really a roadmap and a playbook upon which to develop their curriculum inside the school. You know, we want students to be self-guided. That's how we feel that you build the most character. It's kind of the Montessori approach, if you will, but you still need that structure.
Looks like Barbara Ganson has a question really quick, but we'll go to Barbara. We'll answer those questions in a minute. I want to ask also Hernanda and Scott, before I let you go, what drone do you prefer using in your classroom? Because that's one of the biggest questions we have for educators.
And I think you're going to find probably across the board, we're using the Tello drone. You know, it's a DJI drone. It's designed for classroom use. It's resilient. I just had a question yesterday from a school. How do you break them? I said, I threw it across the room and it held up. You know, you might have to replace some props. You know, I used to love the Parrot Mambo. Unfortunately, Parrot discontinued they went into more of the enterprise. I thought it was a neat platform, but the Tello is a great platform. And we're always looking, you know, it's tough to use the Tello younger than the 4th grade level. It becomes a little challenging, a little problematic. We're always looking for we're assessing some drones now that would be appropriate for the K through 3 grade level, and then develop curriculum around those students as well.
That sounds great. Hernanda, what do you use, and do you have, I know that you talked about your age group and that you're not limited also to the borders, Hernanda, but what drone do you use typically?
Yep, we start them off with the Tello. And I think even no matter what age group it is, the Tello is just really fun. Like Scott said, it's you know, doesn't break as easily. It doesn't run. You don't run into all of those problems. And primarily, we in addition to that, we also use flight sims. And so with our kids being online, a lot of times we're able to utilize those simulators in a much more easier fashion, because they get the hands-on experience. We also talk controllers, and then we have a dedicated person. Like I have a person that is dedicated in that area to represent, you know, like a drone pilot, I want to say, a professional that can also come and they speak with our girls too. So when we're talking about using a handheld, I think hands down, the Tello is really cool for everyone. Like Scott, doesn't break as much, easy to learn, drops out the sky and fly. And then you can move on to your Mavic if you are, you know, your Mavic Mini 2 or something like that. Our thing is we just don't want to spend a lot of money right off. I tell people that from the gate, you know, you don't want to go and try to buy you a Phantom, you know, Phantom 4 or some big, you know, Matrice or these, you don't need all of that yet. You know, get you a DJI. Another one that I found is really fun that I've used. I found a really cool drone on Amazon, and I flew it. It had about 15 minutes flight time. It was really fun. It was really great. As a, you know, as a rule of practice, though, you don't want to spend a lot of money on, you know, just out of the box. Just
Right.
go
I
safe.
agree. I don't know if everyone can see, but this is something that I got on Amazon. And it
Yeah.
was only $20.
Yeah.
And of course it doesn't have, the camera, but it's certainly a great lesson. Laquanda, are you there? I just wanted to double check because I wanted you to kind of interject on the age of your students and if you're geographically limited on where you can be. Are you there, Laquanda? Not yet.
If she's
Okay.
not, I can jump in for her. She's age
Yes.
appropriate. She's trending in the age group, the younger to the middle school, and into the high school. So she's kind of K. Well, K's tough. I will be very honest. I think K's tricky.
I agree.
She's probably more like 4 through 12. I hope she doesn't mind me speaking out for her, but I know her fairly well, and
I don't think she minds
that.
at all. So
Yeah,
thank
okay.
you, Scott. I appreciate it. Stevenson, I've got a question for you. What is the importance of UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, and AI, like artificial intelligence, in the drone industry? And, basically what your message is to your students.
Touche. So a few weeks ago, I had the pleasure of doing an interview with Dr. Candace Boyd of as my mind is going blank here because I'm speaking fast, but we did an interview in which we talked about how AIs, so for example, you have your firefighters, instead of going into a building and putting their lives in jeopardy, you can totally program a drone to use artificial intelligence to go through and do some of the initial groundwork that needs to be done. So there's a lot of room for growth in the industry, whether you're looking at volcanoes or the specific examples I mentioned. AIs have a strong entry to market with drones. And I think as we develop this industry a little bit more, we'll be able to, cut the, I don't know why, but I'm very nervous here, Maggie.
No, don't be.
as-
You're doing great. I appreciate that. Thanks.
No, but as the industry develops, clearly we'll be able to utilize AIs to prevent some of the harms that are happening in our society through many different platforms.
There are so many humanitarian ways to
Mhm.
use drones. So, absolutely, you're giving out a really good message.
Yeah.
Fernanda, I have a quick question for you. Quick question. At this point, the U.S. has about 6% only of women in this industry. So can you tell me maybe what are the challenges is to get girls interested in the program?
Yeah, that's really interesting because I talked to, we just did a workshop just last weekend, and it's so funny that you say that there's such a low rate number. And when I presented to the FAA's Youth in Aviation Task Force, they are aware that the numbers are very dismal, and not only in the drone industry, but in the aviation industry as a whole. And what we discussed and what we found out is because there is I think, a lack of transparency in the route and the way. There is a lack of career pathway and clear opportunity and understanding what the industry really means. And I think as members also of the task force, that becomes a legislative and a big layer of ways that the drone is being integrated into the community. And so it makes it less likely to be picked up on by a lot of people because they have fear of the drone swarm, and so they fear that something really crazy is going to happen.
Yeah.
But for our girls, I think that I've found it's intimidating. And so when we meet them where they are, as we do, and we found different ways through through social emotional learning and project-based and hands-on learning. And like I said, we're new, we're about a year and a half, 2.5 years, 2 years in actually doing this, but not new to the tech industry. And it's the same way in the tech industry. It's just STEM all over for girls, right? And it's intimidating because it's the math and it's the science. And it should be introduced in a way that it could be absorbed without intimidation and absorbed and presented in a way that is more functional, fun, and we trick them into learning.
Yeah. That is such a great, there's no accident that there's a powerful young lady in the middle of our logo. When I set out for Drone Legends, you're so right. See, to your point, it's intimidating, right? Math and science and all that, but every girl wants to be legendary, right?
Right.
But not every girl wants to be an engineer or an aviation pilot. So we trick them in. I love your last, Hernando. That was the best. We trick them in, right? So I'm so glad to hear you say that, because you're absolutely right. You meet them where they are, and yeah, just terrific.
Totally agree. And Hernanda, one of the other things that I want to tell the audience, there's no accident to have the A in STEAM.
Yeah.
You know, it used to be STEM, S for science, T for technology, E for engineering, and M for math. And now we have an A, and that's STEAM. And the A is for the arts. And we need creative people. We need creative children, so that they can design the next amazing program, or figuring out how to utilize drones in a different area. They even use it. I mean, you know, let's face it, drones have amazing cameras, and so they can take great photography and cinematography, and we can use that obviously with our platform of social media. Hello. So, you know, sometimes that's the way to bring children in, and especially girls. Let's see. I do have a question from the audience, if you don't mind. Let's see who is asking this. It's Ganson from Boca Raton, Florida. Any programs that can be adapted to college level? Stevenson, do you want to answer that one? Or, I mean, anyone on the panel, feel free to answer that. That would be really, really great. Because obviously, if they haven't gotten into some kind of drone program when they're younger, but they still would like to get into it, is any of the programs that you have adaptable, or is there a suggestion? If not, where would they go?
Absolutely.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Stevenson, and then we'll go to Hernanda and both Scott for that.
STEAM Ed drones, as I mentioned, is customizable for the K through 12, but also clearly college. The drone industry is very, very new. So you think of a person who needs to maybe get a driver's license, right? A car license. If you've never driven a car before, then you kind of are doing the same basics that a high schooler are doing to get their license. So it's the same with the drone industry. Our curriculum is awesome for teacher preparation programs, because clearly once you leave out the program, you'll need to hit the classroom and teach drones or some form of a STEAM platform. So we at STEAM Drones, we make sure we customize it for all the learners through K-12 and above to be able to find your own niche.
So Hernanda, what about you? Do you reach out to anyone in the higher education level?
Yep, and yes, we do. That's our sweet spots too. We work with collegiate girls. We have a collegiate girls team starting now that started this year, and they're kicking off this summer and into the fall. And we utilize, so when I say that we trick them, we really do. So we utilize internships. So when you become an intern, you're also going to start becoming a drone pilot. And then they go, oh, I have to become a drone pilot. And then they start talking about how interesting and cool it is. So we have 5 girls now from the collegiate level, and they are from 2 different HBCUs. And then we also have young ladies that are interns with us who are not only going to be our drone camp instructors, but they are interested in taking up the UAS degree. They'll be graduating from high school. So we've got one that's getting ready to have a scholarship to Embry-Riddle. And so we are really excited about working with the higher level and getting the girls from the collegiate all the way to adulthood into this profession.
That's fantastic. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, you know, we get asked this a lot, and it's sometimes very difficult as a business owner to say no. But we're very careful to know where we fit and where we excel. And, you know, we've decided to go deep and not wide and specialize in that 4 through 7 grade level. There's plenty of options and plenty of people like Steven that are whose programs are structured to be more adaptable and flexible that way. We found that we want to specialize and understand our market very, very well and hone in right there.
Clearly, so, I understand. And I think that the community college is to start there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of programs that maybe they're extra curriculum, but there are some programs that are opening up more and more because there is more of a demand. So I see Laquanda has joined us. Hi, sweetie.
Hey,
Thank
there
you
she
so
is.
much. Some of the questions that we had, and oh my gosh, Scott had your back. He answered a couple of them. Was
That's my
basic,
boy.
the age of your students or the age that your curriculum reach. And then one of the questions that I was asking specifically to Hernando, and you can relate, how do we engage more girls into the program? Because it's so, at this point, the percentage is so low.
Well, I said what Ms. White said. You got to try to trick them into it, really.
Yes.
We tricking them into actually learning, and that's one thing about girls. Girls think about being cute a lot of times, so you have to actually show them how they can be cute with doing drones as well, and that comes into the arts type thing and actually programming as well. And the other thing that I wanted to jump on was the collegiate experience, the collegiate programs. I actually teach at Albany Technical College, computer engineering, electrical and computer engineering. And my program actually has a TCC, which we call a technical certificate. And that technical certificate is unmanned aerial systems repair, being that we're 5 miles from the airport. We're teaching not only Part 107, but we're teaching soldering. We're teaching digital systems, which is the basic computer systems. We're also teaching circuit analysis, and actually the components of the drone and how to be able to repair, take them apart, put them back together. And we're teaching intro to engineering, where they actually learn the engineering design process.
That is amazing. I'm so impressed with everyone here on the panel. One of the questions, by the way, in the audience is from Candy Slocum. She's a local here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. She said, our schools are required to buy American. Are there drones made in the US? So we kind of talked about this, Laquanda, but are you familiar with any drone? If the school is requiring that, are you familiar with anything they can use? Maybe Skydio, or are you familiar with any others?
Not any that's really made in the US. Now, we do have some companies who have transformed drones and are using them for like RoboLink. RoboLink is an American company, but their drones are purchased from overseas as well. So most of them that I know of are that for children are not USA made drones.
Yeah.
Scott may know something different.
Scott,
but
do you have any
who is the group out of? They have the Golden Eagle, and they have the there's a group out near Utah. I'm blanking right now. I'm blanking. They have a neat mid-range. It's almost like a mini base drone. Oh, and I'm blanking out because I wasn't anticipating this question. If I can think of it, I'll put it in the chat. I'll maybe jump off for a second and look them up and then put it in the chat. They're a domestic organization. They have the Golden Eagle that was designed for the armed forces. And they do have a mid-level drone. It's a very interesting platform, and it's escaping me now, but I'll look it up. I'll jump off for a second. I'll hide my screen and I'll come back and I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, and I think one of the considerations, Stevenson, do you have any suggestions? Because one of the things I wanted to mention in regards to having, we call them blue drones in the US. That means they're made in the US. But the concern is the privacy with a camera. And a lot of times, you know, you can start a program without a camera. Like the one that I was showing here, the little green one, it doesn't have a camera, so, and it doesn't have a GPS locator, so that in itself kind of addresses the privacy that you need with, sorry about that, with it being blue. But Stevenson, you might have another idea or input on that.
Touche. And I saw the question, and I think for something to be American made, it has to be part plus labor. There's some ratio into that. The truth of the matter is, folks, say, for example, one of our programs has soldering, and so does St. John's Platinum package. But clearly on the middle school level, when you're talking about the American school systems, you kind of get into a lot of backlash when students are handling dangerous materials. So we, on the American market, we are nowhere next to, I would not even, so we sell to 1 out of the 12 major nations. China sells to 8 out of the 12. So that gives you an inclination of how far behind we are. So if you are looking for an American-made drone, unless you're looking at the Lemur, which is clearly the best made drone that I've seen so far in terms of mini drones, but that's not even available to the market. So I would double check on your paperwork to see what qualifies as American-made, what ratio of parts to labor, and from there I would make an informed decision of how to, progress forward.
Yeah, I think that's good. Well, we've got Dan Strickland asking specifically, do schools need to register drones with the FAA? We have the Antons, the UNIC, and about to purchase drones for SMU Arise program. Do you have any, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but with your schools, do you register them, and do you register your drones through the classroom as a group, or because I'm not sure, I've never had to register them for school. Stevenson, are you aware of it?
I think they just changed the regulations again. But as far as last week was concerned, like 2 weeks ago was concerned, if you're flying inside, then no, you do not have to register it. But if you're flying, because you're not dealing with the FAA when you're inside, but the moment you go into the airspace, that's the FAA. So yeah, no matter how
but if they
small
have
the
the
drone is,
Yukon, the Yukon or the UNIC, sorry, that's a pretty big drone. So I would think that they are intending to fly outside. So does anyone else on the panelists, are you familiar with how you would register the drones? Fernanda or Scott or
no, we're in the class, we're inside, we're in class club sections. We don't ever really get involved in that particular.
And then I'm just going to say, like, if you are, that you definitely have to go to your FAA website and go through the steps there, and they have the section for the UAS, and just follow those prompts leading you there to get registered. I think it's is it through IACRA or one of those acronyms they have. But I mean, that's to Scott's, just what he said too. We just haven't had that, and a lot of times you're not having to register them because you are using them for educational purposes. And then like Stevenson said too, it does change every day with the FAA. So just get those notifications and look out. But if you're not going outside and you're flying in the airspace, no. And if you're flying outside and you're flying in a cage, like a cage tent or something like that, a netted tent, and it's just like, say, just to go through some little hula hoops or something real low, and you're not going into airspace at all, no, you don't have to do anything like that.
That's very helpful. So there is another question in the audience. Trevor Benjamin, I am from the Caribbean, so please we was so pleased to see drones being used in observing the ongoing volcano eruptions activities in the sister islands of St. Vincent. And let's see, sorry, just reading this, and you can probably see this, and the would like to see students, both male and female, being introduced to drones in high school. So many careers are involved since the introduction of drones. Doesn't look like that's quite a question, but if you are extending it out to outside, and could you guys kind of elaborate? Do you have certain missions for them to accomplish in your classroom? Could you tell me a little bit, starting with Hernandez? I have you. What kind of missions do you give your students to engage them in problem solving, in teamwork, and so forth? Obviously, skill.
Oh, yes. And so one of our missions that we like to present to the students are, like this summer, we'll be doing a replicate, like I want to say a crash and test, like a crash site, right? So we're looking at the aerial view. I like that we found some other solutions to software that can help the kids recreate that using the 3D modeling. We break them up into teams. And so we have, our crew members, our flight crew members, and then our communications director, and everyone gets a little piece of their names in the group. they have a title and they have a position, they have a role, right? And
Mhm.
so we're recreating a crash site along with a police officer as a part of our initiative this summer for bringing our program Drones in the Hood. And so with that, we'll be recreating a crash site, crash collision, looking at it from the aerial view. And then their mission is to kind of figure out maybe the logistics, the compass, left, right, direction, and also planning it out, how to get there, how to survey the scene, from the aerial view, what could have happened, deductive reasoning, problem solving, teamwork, and then calculations, mathematical calculations, timing, and then also that social emotional connection of sharing what happened together. And so with
Wow,
that,
that's fantastic. What about you, Laquanda? In your program, do you have something that a problem solving or a mission for your students in your curriculum? Okay, how about Scott?
Yeah, listen, every student, we have everything's based on the mission guide. So we've got a 15 contact hour curriculum that is based on, it's mission based, it's mission driven. So every lesson, it's not a lesson, it's a mission. And the missions are how a drone is solving a world problem. So it goes back to the problem based curriculum. And to Hernanda's point, it encourages the children to work through those problems, to use the drone as the tool by which to address that problem. And so they're put into scenarios where they need to kind of reverse engineer the problem and then use the drone as the tool to address it. And that includes mathematic equations, coding. So we have them typically manually fly a mission first as if they were an operator. And then, okay, now you just helped pollinate flowers in Tsukaba, Japan. Now, how are you going to do that via code? One thing that we've seen with the coding component is there's a lot of watch what I do and then copy it and then watch what it does. And for us, that's not really workable for the students. We like to say, make it do this and then show me how you're going to achieve that. And so that's how we work it. And we use the problem-based scenario of a drone mission for each one of our currently 15 lessons.
You know what I love about that is, like a math teacher, you give them problems, right?
Yeah.
2 + 2 = 4. But instead of that, you're explaining why you need to find this answer, 2 + 2 = 4, and how you can apply that to the real world. So I think that is fantastic.
And it goes back to when you think about, I know it sounds strange to think about it at the 5th, 6th, 7th grade level, but it's also that career tracking of getting a student to think about, oh yeah, this has real world application.
Aha moment.
Yes.
Stevenson, what about you, Stevenson? What kind of do you have missions in your lessons, and can you tell us a little bit about it?
Touche. I love what Scott just said. It is all about real world exploration.
Yes.
And tying that in with your previous question, we are completely anti you taking our product and flying outside. If you think about how things work inside of the school systems, all the drones will be registered probably to the main educator who is facilitating the classroom. That educator now has this thing called a liability. So when they go outside and say 3 to 5 students are flying the drones outside, whatever happens to that drones that falls on the educator is registered to them.
Right.
So we kind of want to stop that from happening altogether. What STEAM Ed Drones is about is taking what is happening into the real world and bring it into the classroom. So we are changing the classroom model. If you would like to go outside, then we recommend you going through FAA certification, Part 107, and et cetera, in which that is a later topic we will develop and talk about. But in terms of STEAM Ed Drones missions and our lesson plan literally encompasses everything that is in the STEAM portfolio. So that is, we talk about the science, whether it's the forces of flight. We talk about whether it's an earthquake scenario or a Chilean, hey, go rescue someone, and this is how to do it. About that, whether it's design, hey, design this drone, it is something we also talk about. And I also wanted to throw a dart at the concern regarding females or girls who STEAM or girls who drone. There's sort of a girls code that says, especially when you look at things like FIRST Robotics or 1080 Education, in which you see parents completely, encourage their young boys to be more tech savvy, while the moms are kind of encouraging their young ladies to do research and etc. With STEAM at Jones, we kind of add both of those platforms together. So you're doing both at the same time, and both is required from all learners in our curriculum.
I think that's fantastic. And we're getting close to the hour. So I want to give everyone an opportunity to just kind of, if there's a takeaway that you really want to express to our audience, we will have some more time at the end of all of our segments to ask questions. So if you have asked questions in the chat, I'll go over them later. But I'm going to start with you, Stephen, since I have you here. What kind of takeaway would you like to to leave with for our audience, whether they're the educators, administration, or even a parent?
Sure. Thank you, Maggie. If you take nothing away from everything that has happened here today, or everything we the panel has talked about, take away enthusiasm. That's the main aspect that you need to get to leave, to go through your classroom, to go through your community. Once you have that enthusiasm, you can literally make anything possible. So for us, at STEAM at Jones, visit us at steamatjones.com, but we would love your enthusiasm. We would love to come into your school system and have enthusiasm for the drone industry.
I think that's wonderful. Hernanda, do you have kind of an ending, a takeaway, a kind of a message that you would like to give our audience?
Just really stay motivated. Stay creative, stay active, know that you don't always have to reinvent the wheel, and look for really cool, innovative solutions that fit what you're doing and fit the grade levels and students that you're interested in participating. It's just really a really great time to integrate drones into any program, any level. And just whatever it is that you're doing, make sure it's, fun, it's unique, it's, from something based on what you're feeling, and also getting feedback from your kiddos, right, on what they want. I think that's really important. So it's just really a fun time. Just stay creative, stay active, and stay engaged. Really great programming like these can help you. Any of us can help you. And there's tons of information out there for you. So just stay positive, stay engaged, stay fun, stay active, and, be encouraged. Good luck.
Yeah, and Hernanda, I love your energy, and I know that you're going to have to go. You're not going to be at the end of our segment, but anyone that has any questions or wants to reach out, please see the chat, and also get onto our website that you registered for this workshop. We'll have all that information, but you're very inspiring, so I really appreciate that. So, Laquanda, are you there? Do you have any kind of last statement or something that you want the audience to take away with?
Just as everybody else said, it's just the encouraging the children to get involved in the STEM field. That's the most important thing that we can do. And finding what they like. I always say, what does the child like to do? And that's the thing that you jump on, and that's the thing that you work with. Because if you get what they like, then it's easier for you to get them into doing what you need them to do for them to learn. Again, it's tricking them into getting the knowledge that they need.
Yeah, that's such a good message. And again, with all the things that you have done and you've got your hands in, I'm just very impressed with, your background, and, just the fact that we do have representation of girls, of women that are in this industry. So just the girls seeing that you're doing this, Laquanda, is inspiring enough. So thank you so much. Scott, what about you? Can you tell me a little bit about kind of your last, if anything that you want as a takeaway for the audience, the educators here?
Yeah, I'll go on your last point. And what Laquanda said, with the females, we've been very fortunate that we're at least 50% down the line. It's incredible. And I attribute that to, when I started Drone Legends, what I wanted to do is create that brand. I thought about me as a 10 or 11-year-old child, and what would I be attracted to? Was I attracted to classrooms and no, I was attracted to that magic of like Disney and Star Wars and for girls it was, you know, so bringing them into the legend, the drone legends community. I wanted to create something that was bigger than any one child, that they feel like they're part of, no matter where you come, your background, whatever it is, that you're part of something bigger. You're part of the drone legends community. You know, once a drone legend, always a drone legend. And so that's what I'd leave you with, is that when we talk about keeping it fun and engaging, Drone Legends is an edutainment experience, but there's no lack of depth and rigor to the academic component of it. But the children are drawn in because of that allure of being legendary.
Yeah, that is fantastic. And I appreciate it. I guess what I want to do, I just want to encourage everyone to stay throughout the whole program. We have our panelists, and I know that Scott, you're still going to be available to answer questions. Stevenson and Laquanda said too. So please stay tuned. I want to move into the next segment, but I want to remind everyone we have a survey, and I think Ken is going to put it in the chat if he hasn't already put it in the chat. And that's basically giving us some feedback, and I will share it with our presenters too. So please make sure that you fill out that survey. That way we know what you like, what you'd like to see more of. So that's really important elements. I kind of wanted to mention a couple of our sponsors, AUVSI, our Lone Star chapter here. They basically are one of the biggest. AUVSI stands for, oh my gosh, stands for, oh, I was looking at Drone Plus, so sorry about that. There's AUVSI Lone Star chapter. There is Drone Plus, and that's what I wanted to talk about. Drone Plus is a locally based retail and repair shop here in Plano, Texas. And they established themselves at 2015 in Plano by the, or actually it's Frisco, sorry about that. Frisco, Plano area. And they not only provide sell drones, repair drones, but they also have certain instructional classes and offer for platforms, different platforms, and they go over that too. So they're one of our great sponsors. And HAF is a engineering company here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Dr. Half had a deep commitment to innovation and engineering, and so they design like roads and highways and bridges. So they're one of our great sponsors. Really appreciate that. But let's go ahead and move on to Sharon Rossmark from Women in Drones. Thank you, Sharon. And she's going to be talking with Ken Berry from SMU. Really excited about it. So go ahead, Sharon.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay, Maggie?
Yes, we can hear
Great.
you just fine, and we can see the images too, so thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, Maggie, for the introduction, and thanks to our inspirational panel for sharing insights into drone education for students. As Maggie just said, my name is Sharon Rossmark, and rather than the presentation, I have the honor and pleasure of interviewing Dr. Kenneth Berry. Dr. Berry is a research professor at SMU, Southern Methodist University. And just like our panelists and like me, he shares a passion for introducing drones into education programming. So Ken, are you there?
I am.
Great. Before we dive into your topic, please take a moment to share a bit more about your background.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. This is quite an honor. Laquanda, Scott, Hernanda, and Stevenson, I know most of you guys, and these guys are really the pioneers of doing drones in the classroom, and it's quite an honor to be with them. So thank you for inviting me, and it's an honor to be here and working with them. My background is I'm an educator. I started in education way back. I've been an educator for 32 years. I was a middle school and high school teacher in Los Angeles. I was a science teacher. I taught biology and physics and a few other things. So I did that for about 7 years. And then I was hired, I had the opportunity to be hired by NASA's worst named research center, which is called the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And for some reason, people believe they make jets there. However, it is the lead center for robotic exploration of the solar system. So I always considered JPL to be the advance team for NASA. So JPL was the first space center to get, the first American space center to get anything into space. So Soyuz, everybody remembers Soyuz 1 and Soyuz 2, but nobody remembers the Explorer, which was the first US orbiter, and that came from JPL. And then JPL got to the moon first, and JPL ever since has been getting to all of the different objects in the solar system. So when I was there, I was working on the Galileo mission, which went to Jupiter. And then they have missions that have going to the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune. And there is a mission going to Pluto. I know it's been demoted from a planet, but there is a mission going there. And then I was also on a mission called Stardust that was going to a comet. They also go to meteors at times. And they went to Venus. And of course, they went to Mars. So any missions you hear going to any of the planets of the solar system come from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And the most exciting one right now is the Perseverance that just landed February 18th on Mars. And not only is that cool because there's this rover on Mars, but there's also a drone on Mars, which is awesome. But while I was at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, I got a doctorate in educational technology. And then I became a professor at Cal State Northridge, and I was invited to come to the University of Texas at Dallas to open a center there. And then I've moved on to the Southern Methodist University now, where I'm a research professor. So that's kind of my background.
Well, that's exciting. And so, that leads perfectly into my next question, which is for many of us currently working in the drone industry, we did not start off with the intent to develop a career in the drone industry. And I gather that that might be the same for you. And so for me, a frequent question I'm asked is, how did I become interested in drones? So how about you? How did you become interested in drones?
Well, I did my research for my dissertation to become a doctorate in robots in the classroom. So because JPL and NASA, or JPL is the lead center for robotic exploration of space, one of my main jobs was to promote robots in the classroom. And so I learned quite a bit about robots, and I got into a lot of the different competitions, and I wrote a good bit about robots. And when I came to the University of Texas at Dallas, I was brought to the University of Texas in Dallas to develop a robotics program. But while I was doing that, drones got my attention, and I developed a drone summer camp as well as the robotics camps. And that took off, pun intended. But that was when I first was introduced to drones and how drones, how exciting drones can be and all the different applications of drones and how that industry is really, really exploding. I mean, it was also when I first ran into the FAA. So the FAA heard about my my summer camp somehow, and they gave me a call, which was a very interesting call. The FAA, if you know the history of drones, you understand that drones are being regulated heavily by the FAA. Those regulations seem to be loosening up every year, but they were a bit tight when I met them, when I talked to the FAA, and they told me that I really shouldn't be working with drones, and that I needed a license to work with drones and all sorts of other things. And they helped me to understand and respect federal agencies and how they affect drones and how they're trying to control the environment. So that was very interesting, and it certainly piqued my interest more in drones. And by working with kids in drones, they were just inspired. I could tell that they loved drones. And I started working with teachers, and they had the exact same questions about drones as they did about about robots. Their questions were, where can I use this thing? It's so cool. I know it inspires kids, but where and when can I use this in the classroom? And then how can I use them safely? That's a big question, because there's props on these, and those props can hurt fingers, and they can certainly do a lot of damage to eyes and other types of things. And then they were asking, where do you find curriculum for these drones? How can I use this in the classroom very specifically? And this was before Scott and Hernanda and Laquanda and Stevenson had their stuff going, I think. And it was very interesting to talk to them and to realize that they just wanted to look for help. And my idea was that I'm no expert on this, but I know that there are experts out there. And if we as educators develop a community, then we can certainly support each other, and we will be able to come up with just about any answer in the world. Because you know that the 6 degrees of separation, where there's probably some, if you name anybody, and there's probably 6 degrees of separation to you. So as far as understanding stuff, if you get enough people in the room, somebody knows the answer. So it was all about developing a community. And so I wanted to develop a community around drones in the classroom. And that's where I've been heading in the last few months and years.
So in essence, while our panelists are considered pioneers, you were even pre-panelists. So I'm not even sure what category that would fall into, but let's just say that it's also, you are also a pioneer, which takes me to your last statement, to the next question. So, you know, one of the key findings of the work that we've done at Women in Drones is the importance of engaging educators in the learning process of introducing drones into the classroom. And so, to your point, you've initiated a platform with several organizations to support educators interested in learning about bringing drones into the classroom. Please share with our audience your initiative to support educators.
Well, when I got this idea about the community, the best community that we have here in Dallas is the community that Ernest started with this UAS task force. And I started working with Ernest, and then he immediately introduced me to Hub 88, which is in Chicago, and it introduced me to you and Women in Drones. And Women in Drones is an amazing organization. I hope you have had an opportunity to tell all the wonderful things that you've done in Women in Drones in this venue at some point. If not, y'all should go to Women in Drones, because that's an amazing networking place and just a wonderful, wonderful organization that Sharon runs. And then I met with more people in Dallas, a lot of educators in Dallas. Fort Worth has written a grant and for drones and are purchasing a number of drones. Dan is in Fort Worth, but I'm not sure if he's part of the group, the grant. And then we met, Ernest has a friend in Syracuse. Actually, I think she's a relative in Syracuse, New York, and we've connected with them. And we've connected with Oregon, and we're connecting with Australia, and we're connecting with Germany. And ARISE has really become an international organization. ARISE stands for Aerial Robotics in STEM Education. So we developed that idea, this group together. But when we met together and we started talking and we learned about all the different things that we had in common, we decided on trying to focus our support in two different directions. One of those directions was developing conferences, drones in the classroom conferences, so that we could support teachers. Teachers could get together, they could learn the different topics that are happening, that are specific to educators in the classroom. And we also wanted to develop a competition, an engineering competition. So there's a lot of competitions out there, and a lot of them are kind of this, you buy a drone and then you fly the drone. They called buy and fly competitions. What we're interested in developing is a competition that's engineering. Kind of like, if you're familiar with the robotics competitions, kind of like the first robotics competition, where you get a kit of parts and it's based on things like Apollo 13, where they just threw out the bits of parts down on a table and said, we've got to save these guys, and this is what we have. So what we are interested in doing is creating an engineering competition for the students to actually design and to implement a drone, and then be able to fly it and accomplish a mission. So with regards to the conferences, we had a meeting, we had our first conference in 2019, and it was face-to-face, and it was at SMU. And to my surprise, 100 educators showed up from all over Texas, as far away as El Paso. If you know how big Texas is, it's like half of the United States to get from one side of Texas to the other side of Texas. And we had people from everywhere in Texas. So I was very impressed. So we ramped that up. And then with the Arise group, we had our second conference in November of this year. And 260 people attended that. It was virtual. But we had representatives from 15 different states and 15 different countries, as far away as Australia, the Middle East, Germany. There were lots and lots of people there, lots and lots of interest, and that really kind of shocked us as well. And we're going to have another conference in October. So that's an opportunity to, once again, meet people from all over the world. We're probably going to do it virtually again, but we have a new venue that's much better for networking now. So it should be a very exciting conference. We'll get the information out about that when we're ready to promote it. So that's the conference and when we're going to do the conferences. And with regards to the competitions, we're essentially announcing we're going to have a competition next spring. And in preparation of that competition, or the tournaments happening next spring, we're doing a teacher training this summer where we're going to try out a proto game. And then we're going to have a kickoff at the conference in the fall. And then hopefully we'll have tournaments in Chicago and in New York and the Dallas area in the spring. And then we'll have a championship here in Dallas sometime in early summer, late spring of next year. So those are the things we're working on. It's an amazing group that we're in, the Arise group. And I would, if you're interested, I would love to have you join us and be a part of that group.
Absolutely. And of course, we'll be posting it on the COGS website once the information is available. And, you know, what I love about how you've grown this since 2019 is that you've incorporated not only here within the States, but it keeps getting bigger, because now we're bringing in organizations and educators from around the globe. So that's what's exciting.
And
so,
it's thanks to you, Sharon, and to Ernest and to everybody else who's part of this, that it's really expanded as fast as it has.
Well, to your point earlier, you mentioned 6 degrees of separation, and I'm really starting to think, because of the pandemic, it's actually becoming more like 3 or 4, because we've all connected via online platforms like this. So, you know, kudos to you for just bringing us all together. But moving on, you know, our panel session right before us shared their approach to drone education. I think it would be great for the audience to hear your perspective from a higher level about incorporating drones into the classroom. And that's because our panelists spoke more on the operational level. But for you, I'd like for you to share, what are the key links to learning opportunities associated with drones in education?
Well, drones are wonderful. They're inspiring, they're motivating. And if you can bring that motivation into the classroom, that's going to help your kids to learn so much more. And there's some real obvious links of drones into standards-based learning and into typical classes, certainly physics classes. There's lots of connections to drones. There's all of the forces working on the drone. So you can talk about Newton's laws and a number of different things with regards to physics. If you do physics or physical science in your classrooms, there's lots of chemistry that you can work on and demonstrate with regards to batteries. So that's a clear connection to chemistry, geometry. There's a center of gravity with regards to drones that you have to focus on, and finding that center and finding it has a lot to do with geometry and understanding how loads are put onto the drone, and geometry is a clear connection there. You can teach algebra. There's all kinds of ratios and relationships within the drone that algebra describes beautifully. So you can connect lots of different pieces, very specific content that already exists. There's a lot of content that you can teach with drones in the high school level, at the middle school level, and at the elementary school level. Elementary and middle school have a little bit more flexibility with regards to what they teach. So it might be easier to do it there. But one of the things that drones does and robotics does and a lot of technology programs do is that it changes the learning environment to a certain extent. There's a group of skills called the 4 C's in education, which is creativity, critical thinking, communications, and collaboration. And these essentially have, these are the skills that industry wants. They want people who can work in teams well, because nothing can really be accomplished by an individual. So you need to know how to be a team player. You need to know how to communicate well. If you don't know how to communicate well, then you can't really get your ideas across and you can't collaborate particularly well. You need to be a critical thinker so that you can think about the issue and break it down into small solutions. And you need to be creative. You need to be very creative in what you do, because wealth and value is generally built on something that's brand new, and coming up with something brand new is a creative process. And the whole STEAM, the arts part of STEAM, is all about the creativity. So we're kind of changing the learning environment with regards to drones and technology, and it is right in line with the industry desires. These are our good workers, the ones who can collaborate and communicate and think critically and be creative. And we're trying to create that in classrooms as well. So we're actually focusing almost on these capstone engineering classes that are kind of new and developing within school systems. So there's been a big recognition that engineering is important in schools, but you can't really add a whole nother class to your to high schools, because the curriculum is so it's so compressed as it is, and trying to get through just all your science and math classes and everything else, it's difficult. But if you have a capstone course that is design based and engineering, you might be able to give kids an experience in engineering, give kids an experience in design, and give kids an opportunity to do something really radical and fun, like work with drones. So that's what we're hoping to develop, and our competition actually is going to go along with this whole capstone engineering class. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish with in the classroom with our drones.
I like how you've connected the dots in bringing us full circle in terms of the importance of it in the classroom. So, as we wrap up, and in closing, we all know that drones are useful tools in business and that drones can be fun, but the overall bigger picture, why is it important?
Well, drones are changing the world. Drones are going to be a major part of the world, of our kids' world. So they are our students' world. They are our future. They're going to make big changes with regards to delivery. They're going to make big changes due to medical responses, how quickly you can get a medical response. They're making lots of inroads into first responder activities. So firemen are putting drones over fires to identify where the fire needs to be addressed quickly. Drones are being used to identify survivors in disasters. Drones are being used for inspections of bridges and pipelines and all sorts of other things. They are changing this world, just like computers were changing this world. But what we want to do in Arise is to get ahead of the process. So we know that they're going to change the world. We know that they're going to change how we travel and pretty much every aspect of our world. So we want to lead the trend with regards to drones instead of following. So often educators are stuck following a trend. Educators got into computers after computers became commonplace in the work world. Educators got into different things after the work world is on it. What we want to do is to lead educators and lead our students into the new world by giving them the drones in advance, helping them to learn what industries they can participate in the future and how fast those industries are actually growing. So we're all about getting ahead of the curve, and we're all about trying to get drones into kids' hands because that's going to be part of their world, and we want them to be aware of it and be able to work with it once they get there.
Well, in closing, my final comment is that what you just said rings so true to me. I can't tell you how many times over the last 7 years since I've been in the industry that people have said, Sharon, what are you doing with this drone thing? This is just a toy, or this is going to go away. And you probably know this, Ken, as well as I do, is that the saying really has been, they said the same thing about the telephone. They said the same thing about the computer and, lots of other technology in between. And here we are, and some of us have heard some of the same thing about drones. So I think what you've just framed for us is very important for our audience to take away, is that drones are not going away. They are, in fact, already changing the world and will continue to change the world. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and see if we have any questions in the chat box. Thank you so much, Dr. Berry, for your time and for your presentation. And just scanning the chat box, I don't see any questions right now, so we'll find out if there are some at the end. I'll be happy to handle those at that time. So thank you,
Sharon. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sharon.
Ken. Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Sharon, so much. So informative, and just giving us a perspective of the future is amazing. So I want to move on to Evan Morelli. Evan Morelli is always a part of our workshop, and he always gives us some great information on safe practices. And I know he was going to emphasize safe practices on schools. So Evan, go ahead.
Thanks, Maggie. My name is Evan Morelli. I run a company, Elm Aerial Services. And let me share my screen. Just going to do the full screen because we're going to go to the internet for a second. Okay. So today we're going to talk about step-by-step of, professional drone piloting, but as it pertains to flying drones in an educational setting. And so some of these are some recommended do's and don'ts, things you need to consider that are maybe outside of the specific lesson plan or part of the curriculum, but these are things that help control your environment to make them safer and less likely for something unavoidable very avoidable to happen. First thing we're going to talk about, because we are in North Texas Central region, we're going to talk about the DFW Metroplex airspace. There's a couple interesting things about it. And if you're an educator in DFW and you want to fly outside, so therefore accessing the federal airspace, these are things that you may want to look up or know how to look up when conducting your lessons. So as a quick review, we have general airspace classification. Class A, that's where you have commercial planes. That's where they're flying. You're almost never going to access that. I've even heard of people accessing that. But Class B, Class C, Class D, Class G airspace is going to be layered on top of each other all over the place. And if you're flying outside, you will very likely encounter controlled airspace, but if not, uncontrolled airspace. So the DFW airspace, it's kind of difficult to determine what's going on in this airspace. This is actually the air map for DFW, and it is a giant mess. And it's difficult to look at and figuring out where you are, what's over you, and what rules you need to apply. Now that works in your 107 test that you learn how to read this chart, but it doesn't necessarily make it intuitive. So keep in mind that the map is broken up into grids, and we can, therefore, depending upon where you are, figure out what are the needs for that flight, the requirements for that particular grid. Now, the FAA does a really good job of posting their GIS information on each individual grid. Can y'all see my browser? Okay.
Yes, we can see it. Thanks.
Bring it down here. So you can see these grids right here. This is the DFW area. Now there's red grids and there's green grids. The red grids are not LANS enabled. That's automatic through your app or through the Know Before You Fly or the Drone Zone, the application of a LANS authorization to controlled airspace. So you're mainly looking at over here at the Naval Air Base, right? So obviously you're going to
Up all of a sudden you're stalled. So we'll wait till Evan comes around and unstucks himself. This is Maggie.
Sorry,
There you go. Thank you.
My power went out for a second. That was weird. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make
Yes.
that was weird. My power went out for a second. That was very strange.
No worries.
That's why I'm hotspot internet. So, okay, the green squares, on the other hand, those are LANS enabled. So if you need to do 107 style flying, these are for non-107 flying is defined as any flying that is not purely for enjoyment, right? And outside. If you're inside in an overhead environment, it's not 107 flying because you're not accessing the federal airspace. But if you're outside, you will need these LANS authorizations. So this is a good way to look at it. However, what it doesn't show is it doesn't show whether or not you have something specific to that day. This is just general information. So if you go to the FAA, it's a Air Map, which is a really good website for that. You can log in and you want to plan a flight. After you log in, you can see that they have an updated map for where you are in case something is specifically happening, especially if you're looking out for if you're near a stadium or if you have a large stadium, like if you are a college and you have your stadium right on your campus and there's maybe a game going on or something when you want to conduct a lesson plan, then that can be a factor as well. So, and this will show you in each grid what the controlled airspace requirements are. Now they'll show these red circles. Can anybody take a guess what this red circle is going to be? It's a temporary flight restriction that is perpetual. Let me go to the chat and see what the chat says. Where the chat is.
I'm not necessarily seeing anything right now, but definitely the TFRs can be temporary or they can almost be like existing because of like President Bush living in the area.
Right. So, and this will give you updated information, things that are going to be relevant to the day that you're going to fly. So you can check, again, if you're by a stadium or if something is happening around your area, you'll be able to get more updated information from there. So operating under 107, some things you need to realize about operating under 107, that in
I guess, Evan, let's try again. You're breaking up again. It's sounding a little like a robot.
doing a lesson.
Can you hear us, Evan? Yeah.
Here, is that better?
There, that's so much better. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's technical. You can't, some things you can't help. So thank you.
Yeah. So the aircraft must remain in line of sight. So you must always be able to see it. And there's 4 indicators. You got to be able to tell altitude, attitude, speed, and direction. So as long as you can tell those things, you're technically within visual line of sight. And that can either be with your visual observer, which could be like a TA, or maybe in a teacher assistant or something like that. But the pilot in command needs to be able to determine these things. And you're subject to weather visibility limitations. So if you are outside, you have 3 nautical mile radius that you need to be able to determine those things. Most of these small drones are not going to be able to go that far with being able to determine those 4 factors. And the night flying requirements, 3 nautical mile strobe, that's probably not something a lot of people are going to do. But if you do, you're going to have to think about gearing requirements for a night flying. And you're going to think about additional requirements as far as authorization or waivers. So spatial restrictions, this is going to be difficult for students, right? As far as being part of the operation versus being not actively part of that particular flight. And so it's going to be kind of, you're going to have to really, therefore, manage where your students are, because you can't fly over people. If there's students that are observing another set of students doing a flight, does that mean that they're part of that operation? I would say no. I don't think there's a lot of literature on that. But if they're not specifically doing that flight, if they're not in that particular group, you don't want to fly those drones over them because they're not aware of what is happening in that particular flight necessarily. Under covered structures, and that's not necessarily flying inside of a building, that's flying under into a covered structure from the outside. And inside a stationary vehicle, don't fly in a stationary vehicle. Daylight operations only for civil twilight. So if you do like a before or after school program, you need to make sure that you know what civil twilight is. Civil twilight, there's one in the morning, one in the evening, and it's what qualifies, day flying. If you do it before civil twilight in the morning or after civil twilight in the evening, then you're technically night flying, and that changes your considerations. And you can look that up online depending upon where you are. What is the civil twilight where you are? If you are flying and let's say your school is near an airport, you got to yield always to the manned aircraft. You are unmanned. You always should yield. You should always get out of the way. Sometimes manned aircraft, they're not where they're supposed to be. And, that's not something that you can do anything about except for getting out of the way, because you don't want to cause an incident in which somebody gets hurt. So the maximum ground speed is 100 miles per hour, maximum altitude of 400 feet above ground level, minimum weather visibility of 3 miles, and you need ATC permission for class B, C, D, and E airspace. If you are in G airspace, you do not need authorization. So personnel restrictions. A person may not operate an unmanned aircraft if he or she knows a reason or physically or mental condition that would interfere with the safe operation of small UAS. So that's something that maybe, as educators, you need to look at your kids if they're having a bad day, if they're clearly not in the right headspace to be operating UAS that could cause danger. Maybe they're, just not having a good day. That's something that you should really be considering, because the pilot in command that's helping to give the lesson is the one that ultimately is responsible for what happens when that student is flying, regardless of what, whether they're holding the controls or not. That student that is holding the controls, what they do, you are responsible for. So that's up to you as the pilot in command. You are the ultimate authority. You need to make sure that whatever student you're handing it to is in the right state of mind to be conducting whatever flight that you're doing. 1 aircraft limit per pilot in command. That's something that you want to make sure that you don't get multiple groups going around at the exact same time. And this is 107, so this is outdoors, right? If you have multiple cages set up inside of like a gymnasium, that's different. But if you're outside conducting a flight, you would be doing one flight, one PIC per operation. So no operating from a moving aircraft. I don't know how you do that, but that's something that we should mention. No careless or reckless operation. And that's something I've worked with in education with a company called 1080 and doing some of their programs. And careless or reckless operation, dealing with kids, especially with small drones, if they're doing manual flying, they want to crash it into stuff. They just do. They want to see it crash, or they want to fly it at their friends. And so having a really controlled environment where they're doing something from A to B and you are there to step in if they start misbehaving is, I would say, like the largest amount of task loading that you'll have during running an actual lesson with drones. And no carriage of hazardous materials. I don't know if you do that in the environment of a classroom. So Texas law specifically, because we are again part of the North Central Texas region, that keep in mind that federal regulations supersede state regulations. If the state regulation says you can do something, that the federal regulation says you can't, right? If the federal regulation says you can't, it doesn't matter what the state regulation says. But if the federal regulation says you can, but then the state says not in this state, then they get to have authority. So like, for instance, Texas state parks, you cannot fly in Texas state parks except for a few very specified ones, even though normally the federal government does not weigh in on whether you can fly in state parks. And there are like Oklahoma state parks or other state parks you may be able to fly in, but Texas specifically says in our state, you can't fly in state parks. So you can't fly near critical infrastructure. You cannot use drones to hunt, drive, capture, take, or count photography of any wildlife. Drones are not allowed in Texas state parks. They are permitted individuals in certain professions to capture images using those professions using UAS are no longer individual as identifiable in the image. So that means if you take a picture of somebody, they cannot be identifiable. Law prohibits local governments from regulating UAS. So that's something that could happen if you have like a concerned parent. If you are flying with a class and your school's in a neighborhood and a concerned parent complains to the city council and says like, hey, I don't want drones flying around my house, even if it's a school. Like, well, if you're doing all the federal things you need to do correctly, that the city can't really step in and tell you that you're breaking federal law or you're breaking your regulations as a 107 pilot. They don't have that kind of authority. So on-site considerations, and this is again part of the outside, I'll cover the inside considerations here in a minute, but this is a huge one, and this will affect indoor flight operations, but metal objects are your worst enemy. They will cause the most amount of interference, especially when you go to more sophisticated drones. Maybe if you're doing a video stream, you're using Wi-Fi streaming for video and your control versus maybe Bluetooth or maybe something with a lower bandwidth. Invisible metal rebar on a playground, just playground equipment and as a whole, they can cause interference and they can cause, a degradation of your connection, which can possibly trigger a return to home mechanism. The radio and cell interference may also be present depending upon whether you have like Wi-Fi security cameras at a particular school or whether it's Wi-Fi repeaters or what have you. That can potentially cause issues. So you just need to be cognizant of that. Most of the time, if you're going to be outside, you can't really avoid it inside, but if you're going to be outside, fly on the grass. Even because if your drone crashes too, it's much easier. It's going to damage the drone less. Try to avoid big concrete pads. Even though that seems like a better place to fly, you can use a small landing pad, which are not hugely expensive at all, and it keeps the drone from getting dirty. But I would definitely recommend being on the grass when you fly. So wind and weather conditions. So let's say you're going to fly a drone class lesson outside. You want to check the OEM flight parameters, and you're going to have to do, and teachers do this all the time, I know, your pre-planning of your lesson plan. But in part of that, you want to include checking the weather, which seems obvious, but specifically you want to look at checking your wind conditions. each of the drones, like the Tello, the Phantom, Skydio, what have you, are going to have within their manual what is the sustained wind recommended cap and what is the burst gust wind recommended cap. And so, you want to look at your wind chart for that particular area and see if, if it's going to be too windy of a day, you shouldn't do it. So I would check them 24 to 48 hours out. Also, if you are in a controlled airspace area, depending upon, if you're near, for instance, like Alliance Airport, which is a commercial airport up in Northwest Fort Worth, just south of Denton, they require 24 to 48 hours out for Alliance approval to fly in their airspace if you're a certain closeness to the airport. And I'm not talking like the 5-mile perimeter. It's the difference between like literally one side of the street grid and the other side of the street grid, where you go from like a 400 grid to like 100 grid. And so you want to make sure that you've looked that up in ample amount of time. Allow for flexibility with the lesson plans, because if you get rained out or something like that, or you're not able to fly at that particular area, you're going to need to move it around some. And then I also keep a handheld wind gauge whenever I'm going to fly, because wind charts are really good, but you really want to know what the wind is like exactly where you are. So you can get them on Amazon. Having a little handheld wind gauge can give you a lot more sense of like what is going on specifically where you are, because architecture, buildings can cause wind drafts and little tunnels and areas versus like if you're out in the middle of a field, so on and so forth. So you want to make sure you really understand that. Required waiver information. If you are a teacher, you're 107 pilot, and you want to get waiver or authorization passage through the FAA, you want to know exactly where you're going to be, longitude and latitude, the highest specificity you can find, your maximum altitude, that's going to be super important, how fast, the speed in which you want to keep your drone going during that flight. So if you're going to try to do it from one side of the field to the other, you need to know how long that's going to take. So your time of flight, know exactly when your flight is going to be conducted, and your registration information. If you do not include those things, and this is for a manual submission for either authorization or a waiver, that's minimum level of information you're going to need to get authorization or to get your waiver accepted. You're also going to need to talk about like, how are you going to mitigate risk? How are you going to make this safe? If you're going to talk about that you have students that you're going to be flying with, or you're going to have them flying, that may make the FAA say, okay, well, I want to hear about what you're going to do to increase the safety to make it so that the likelihood of having any kind of incident is as low as humanly possible. So expanding upon that, saying how you're putting control systems in, is a very good idea. You can't necessarily say too much about putting control systems and safety systems in place. So with required personnel, like you need one PIC per aircraft, but if you're doing like a small group, you're going to need a visual observer that's working with you, because especially if you're doing something in the outdoors, you need to understand where, if you're going around corners or if you're going over trees, having that extra spotter can help you maintain those visual line of sight requirements. And so that's really important. And also, if you're working, if the drone program that you're specifically doing is about AI, autonomous machine learning, something like that, it may be a good idea to have somebody who's a data integrity specialist, somebody who's watching the data stream, who's making sure that the data is coming in cohesively. Or if you have to land and download the data, it can help you fly more if you're swapping out SD cards or downloading off of the drone actively. What would suck is if you download that or you get that data, take off, and then it crashes and you lost that first flight of data, right? So having a data integrity specialist is a pretty good idea. So recommended equipment, when you go out, especially if you're doing a lesson plan with a very finite amount of time, always have backup batteries, like just a ton. Redundant UAV if you can. The PIC or visual observer communication. So if you are doing a large, if you have two teachers, two 107 pilots that are, running operations on either side of a field, or even if they're just in two gyms, right? Having a way to talk to each other without yelling, right? That's not very effective, is a good idea. Safety equipment for personnel, highly reflective vests. If you've got anybody that's going to be out in the operation that is not, that's your visual observer or is just a participant, right, that's actually involved in the flight. Reflective vests, headgear, eye gear, goggles, very good idea. Props sometimes break, right? Sometimes people don't see other people, but it's important to try to do as much PPE as possible to make yourself visible and safe from the one moving part in the drone, which is the spinning blades. Landing pad and spacing cones, especially if you're dealing with a class full of kids, right? Having an area that's partitioned off that says like, this is where we take off and land, because obviously these kids, they're new to this, or they're just now getting into their ability to fly these drones physically. You want to give them as much leeway. You don't want kids meandering and then lingering around the takeoff and landing area and possibly creating a risk. First aid kit, I don't need to tell teachers that. You guys know that stuff happens. Keeping a first aid kit or having one on deck is a really good idea. And then again, the handheld wind gauge, so you can make sure your exact site is within your OEM parameters. So we talk about insurance. I'm sure that most school districts have their own general liability insurance. That's something that you should obviously have for instructors to make sure that if something does happen to a student, that you're covered. And then asset liability insurance. DJI has a form of this. It just really depends on who your vendor is. They can have, if you crash your drone for some kind of reason that they'll typically have codified for you, you can get a certain amount of recoup or a new drone if you purchase this insurance. It's somewhat new. Some of the major insurance industry companies like Allstate, they provide a certain amount of asset liability, but it's still a relatively new thing. So pre-flight planning, again, the visual observer acts as your second pair of eyes, right? So if you have your students, they're all hanging out, getting ready to do their flight, and you have your pilot in command that's actively helping a student, having an assistant there of some kind to watch the drone, but also manage the kids, keep them out of the landing area, the takeoff and landing area, that really helps with the task loading of teachers. Okay, and walkie communication may be needed if you have that certain distance. So your visual observer should be pre-positioned prior to takeoff. So this is just kind of a little small explanation about how to set up a launch area. So you are going to attract attention, obviously. The students are going to be paying attention. So keeping those hard boundaries is super critical, right? So, and that's where your visual observer can come and aid you in making sure the kids stay back, because especially if you're using like a cage, they're going to think they can just get in the cage and talk with their friends and fly right next to where the other person is flying. So creating that boundary zone is a really good idea to just manage safety, and definitely something if you need authorization or manual authorization or manual waiver, absolutely mention, like, we are creating contained environment for these people, for our students to take off and land from. And then I usually like to give like a 5-foot radius minimum, even with the small drones. Just make it a little bit bigger than you think you need. Take as much as you need and just make it a little bit bigger, right? For as much as you can do within your area. And then again, high visibility PPE for the people that are involved in the actual flight is a good thing as well. So your connection planning, depending upon what kit you're using, if you're going to be using either 2.4 gigahertz or 5.8 gigahertz, 5.8 being Wi-Fi, 2.4 being Bluetooth, you may end up using a depending upon if you're custom building some kind of drone, a lower bandwidth connection, like a 900 megahertz, gives you more distance, less data, right? So you want to plan for that, because if you're going to use something out of a FCC certified licensed channel on your actual connection widget, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to have to worry about ham licenses and the FCC and being able to access those channels and such. So that's something to consider as well. Interference, again, we talked about whether or not you have a lot of metal involved in overhead environments, especially if you're in a gymnasium. It can be a factor, just depending upon how fast the drone is moving, whether or not you're able to keep that student pointed directly at the drone. So if you were to do something like a Whoop style indoor racing club at your school, which Whoops are very small drones, they're about yay big and typically have ducted props and everything, so they're not really dangerous. Set up hoops, fly them around. Your interference can get really bad because they're not super powerful transmitters. and the metal's constantly throwing them off. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So when you're conducting your flight, you want to be in constant communication. You want to be over your student, making sure that they're doing everything right. And you want to be able to, as the PIC, take command of the controls at any moment in time. Now, some controllers, some transmitters have a trainer mode, which is extremely useful for, it traditionally been used for teaching airline pilots or aircraft pilots to RC aircraft pilots to fly with an instructor so they don't wreck their $1,000 model aircraft. You can connect two transmitters together, and as the student is flying the drone, if something happens, the instructor can just flip a switch and now they have control. And you don't have to like grab something from somebody's hand, which can also cause getting some kind of jerk from the drone that could potentially cause it to be compromised in the air. So that's something that you could think about doing as well. But those are typically on third-party transmitters, such as like Futabas or Spectrum controllers. So you want to be prepared to make an unexpected return to home. And this can happen, especially if a kid gets overwhelmed, or if you're using like a Phantom 4. I'm not sure. I'm sure the Tello has it. I would have to look at that, but I'm not 100% on that. But the return to home feature, if you have it, always set it, and specifically set how it returns to home. So what the return to home feature is if you lose connection, or if the controller gets turned off, if something happens to where active input is no longer being received, that could even just be losing connection, then the drone will actively return to home and land on its own with a pre-assigned set of parameters, which include, is it supposed to go up and over? Does it go straight back? Does it go back the way it came? And those are things to think about especially if you're flying a drone in an indoor environment and it returns to home, which requires GPS, so it's not likely that you'll be able to do that. But in any circumstance, you still want to be able to have it return to home in case something happens, the controller gets broken, something to that effect. And again, you want to watch for other aircraft. So education in drones, more specifically. So setting up your site, you want to have a controlled airspace. Baseball batting cages, which you can find them on Amazon relatively cheap. They're not overly expensive, and they can be modular and get quite large. They're awesome. Inside, outside, doesn't matter. They're fantastic to use with drones because it creates a very concentrated safe space where you can have your other students be relatively close to the drone and not increase any kind of risk or threat of damage or injury to your students. And then, as you can see right here, this was a competition I did with 1080, where we had the cage set up, we had our landing pad, we used these small drones to teach them like fundamental manual flying skills, and they're able to hover, bring it around. We gave them like small like objectives. We had hula hoops set up in them as well. The only downside to these is the students will obviously knock them into the walls, and they're going to get caught, and they're going to get caught hard, and you're going to have to get them out. So when looking at the square size in the nets, that's something you may want to take into consideration. The bigger squares, they're going to get caught, but it won't be so bad. But if you have really small squares, then it will not get caught as much. But if it does, it'll be really bad. So kind of weigh that how you will. And then also specifically talking about batteries, lithium polymer batteries, they are dangerous, right? And they need to be treated as such. And the kids may not understand or appreciate what can happen when the lithium polymer battery does go pop. And so, having an extra table on the side, something that's monitored and watched, because you can overcharge these batteries. If you have manual, just straight block batteries, you can overcharge them to the point where they don't have, they destabilize and they actually just pop on the charger. So, that's something having battery bags, which you can find on Amazon. They're super cheap. They're not going to stop a battery from erupting, and they're not going to completely contain the eruption, but they're going to give you a hot minute to get people away, to maybe kick it away, get it onto some concrete. I wouldn't necessarily recommend touching it with your bare hand, but it'll buy you a little bit more time than what you would get having just the naked battery combusting into flames right in front of you. So that's something to really think about, is not only where you're going to operate, but also the back end asset management side of having battery charging area. That's another safe locked off space. So drone considerations, there are a lot of curriculums that are sold. We heard about some of them today. If you're looking at what you want to accomplish with this program, some drones, you can go with cheaper ones that are not going to have a open source software system, that are not going to have sensors, that are not going to have auxiliary slots or things like that, that are going to be, if you're thinking more of like coding, machine learning, artificial intelligence, things like that. If you're trying to do more manual flying skills and such, you want to think about, okay, am I going to be using a brushed or a brushless motor? Brush motors are a lot cheaper, but they do wear out eventually, and they have a lot less torque than a brushless motor. Brushless motors are more expensive. They don't break as often. They have a lot longer life, but they at the same time carry a lot more torque. So your chance of injury is much higher. You also want to think about how the students are. You want to think about whether or not they're old enough to deal with a larger, faster, more sophisticated drone. Sometimes having a less powerful drone is better for teaching students than having something that's, more sophisticated or has more power and more punch, because that power system can really cause a bad situation to get substantially worse. You also got to think about whether flight requirements. Do I need this drone to be able to fly outside of an indoor cage, right? Do I need it to be able to go more than 20 feet to accomplish my lesson goal? And that way you can kind of get away with different drones that aren't quite so sophisticated. And then again, what is the budget? Some drones are really expensive, some drones are really cheap. Just really, I would go shopping. If you have a curriculum that specifically puts in a drone that you're going to want to use, obviously use that. But if you're kind of doing a club or something, shop around to what your needs are. So again, the drone considerations: brush versus brushless, programmed flight controller, auxiliary channels for sensors, your lift capacity. Sometimes let's say you want to do like heavy lift drone practice, right? You may at that point want to say, hey, I want to have a bigger motor, or use a 3-prop, a 4-prop versus just a 2-prop. Your propeller considerations are going to come into play at that. Whether or not you use carbon fiber propellers or versus plastic propellers are going to affect its power to weight ratio, especially with the battery as well. So those are the things that you can also like have your students experiment with, but also something as an instructor that you can consider on the onset. I don't want to have carbon fiber propellers, because carbon fiber propellers are basically as close to a knife as you can get with a drone. They're very sharp, they don't bend, and they're going to go through whatever they end up hitting if a student unfortunately gets a finger near it. And again, DIY or pre-assembled. Off-the-shelf drones are really great because they have a lot of support to them, but at the same time, there is a lot to be learned, as we heard earlier about, soldering. That's an extremely important skill. And there's a relative learning curve, especially with drones. So if you do a pre-assembled or if you do a DIY kit, there's a lot of skills to be learned from a ball of parts to something that actually flies. And so I think there's a lot of equity there. So that's something you need to consider. Do you want to put emphasis on that part of the learning process versus, actually flying the drone? And then so the 107 pilot supervision, this is straight from the 107 material you can get on the FAA. And that is: a non-certified person may operate at SUAS under 107 only if he or she is directly supervised by the remote PIC, or the remote PIC has the ability to immediately take correct control of the SUAS. And that is physically grabbing the controller or using the trainer system that I talked about earlier. So asset care, you want to track your flight logs. Battery cycling is something that's extremely important. So especially with kids, they're going to overfly these batteries and drop their voltage very low. And if you're using naked batteries in a balancer, they may overcharge their batteries. And that's something that you really, really, really got to pay special close attention to, because overcharging them can cause them to combust, and over discharging them can cause them to destabilize and not perform quite as well as you want them to. And if you're using a balancer, you're going to be testing battery resistance to tell you, especially if you're using it with a bunch of kids that are going to be flying it over and over and over and over and over again, you're going to accumulate battery resistance within the battery. And what that is that is the dispersion of the lithium polymer ions on the graphene sheet, because these batteries are, in essence, they're like a tiramisu cake. They're just a layer cake of graphene sheets that get in solution lithium ions put on them. And as you charge and discharge them, the distribution of the lithium ions is going to change. And it's going to take more electricity to charge it versus not. And that resistance is a direct measurement of that. So if you're using a balancer, and this is from a DIY perspective, you want to watch what your resistance is, because if you give your students a task to like fly around the circuit and they're using a battery that's relatively old, it doesn't matter how good they fly. If the drone, if the battery doesn't perform well, they're not going to be able to accomplish the task. And you may need to think about retiring those batteries. You will consume these batteries. They will go bad. You will take them and get them replaced. You can take them to Home Depot if you want. That's a good place to get rid of them. They'll take your LiPo batteries, and they have a little receptacle. So Home Depot's a good place to do it. But you will, and that's another budgetary consideration. You're going to consume these batteries. You're going to consume them a lot faster than you think too. You're going to see a big voltage sag, especially when it gets up in the air. It'll go from 4.2 to 3.8 is your range of voltage you get to manage. And it will go to like 4.0 immediately. And when you see that immediate voltage sag, that's when you know that the battery's kind of on its last leg and you should think about replacing it. Tracking your cycles is a good way to kind of manage that, apart from the battery resistance. If you have like a commercial drone battery, something like a DJI battery or something, you can pick an arbitrary number or a number where you start to notice from historical understanding that like, hey, I started to get voltage sag on this battery after we cycled it 60 times, 50 times, 40 times, what have you, and say, okay, well, we should probably think about when batteries get to X cycles that we should just get rid of them and buy new ones and make sure that they're in good shape. So that's something that's really good for upkeeping your program over time. And that's the main consumable thing, apart from maybe propellers, is your batteries, because there's no way you cannot use them. It's like tires on a car. You're just gonna use them up. And so I'd also manage any repairs that you do to the drone and keep those in log in case the FAA comes and asks about having your flight logs and repair logs. That's just stuff you should keep on deck. Maintenance schedule or battery maintenance. Again, you work between 4.2 and 3.8 volts, right? And so that's how lithium batteries work. If you have a commercial drone battery, those batteries have a printed copper board on them that will manage the battery for you. There's good and bad things to that. If you use like a naked battery that's just got leads connected to the graphene sheets, right? There's no parasitic drain, which means if you put them in storage mode, which is typically between 3.75 and 3.8 volts per cell. Okay, so you'll have like 4-cell, 5-cell, 6-cell batteries. This is voltage per cell, because you may look at a battery and say, oh, it says like 14.8 volts. What's that? Well, that's a 4-cell, because you just divide the 4.8 and so on. So the storage mode is going to be a mode that you can store them in for an extended period of time that is safe. It will not combust randomly. You obviously want to keep the batteries set in a cool, dry place that's not going to get them exposed to corrosion or what have you. And I keep my drone batteries always in a battery bag to begin with. And I keep them relatively separated, so there's not all my batteries in one spot. So if one goes up, they all go up, right? I keep them a little bit parsed out. But you want that storage mode. The commercial batteries you get with like DJI, they do have parasitic drain, because those PCBs, those printed copper boards, are going to be managing the battery for you, and they will be slowly leaching electricity. So if you don't pay attention, you don't kind of actively manage those batteries, especially if they're like really low and you leave them like over the weekend, you could come back and they're just dead and you just lost a battery. Because especially with DJI, you have to take the whole battery apart to jump it. And then once it's too low, it's toast. It's trash. You can't really do much with it. So that's something you really need to take in consideration. This is an active maintenance piece of equipment. Cold performance is also something to consider. If you get up in the morning, let's say you're doing a before school program with pilots and such, The cold performance will affect its flight performance. So if you get up in the morning, you get to school, you pull out these batteries, they've been sitting in a cold school all night, right? And they may be charged or what have you, and you just throw them in the drone and expect them to work great. Not so much. If they're overly cold, you are not going to get the same amount of electricity out of them that you normally would, right? So, you know, putting them just in a bag or something, maybe even I put them when I'm out doing actual work, I put them in my jacket pockets if it's cold, just using my body heat to kind of get them warmed up. And then the battery memory as well, that's kind of what we're talking about. Over time, you will get less performance out of those batteries until you start noticing a severe degradation in the performance of the batteries. So battery maintenance is a huge, huge topic, especially from an instructor side, because you're going to be managing a lot of batteries. So getting organized on your battery management will pay serious dividends in just keeping the chaos of what, you know, having a bunch of people using these batteries constantly is going to do. So, and then one other thing I got to talk about, especially with kids, this is more pertaining to like racing drones, but the concept kind of translate in a weird way. And that racing drones crash a lot, right? So you get a lot of shock on the one moving piece of a drone, because drones otherwise are just a solid state device, right? So there's no wear and tear apart from what we talked about with the battery, but that's like a chemical wear, right? But the one point of friction that does move is the motors. And those motors are guided by bearings. If your students are flying these, and especially if they're new and they're crashing a lot, and this is with brushless motors. Brushed motors, you're just going to trash the motor and you need to replace the whole motor. But with brushless motors are going to have bearings that they need to be managed. And once you start hearing that grinding noise, that ringing, it starts to, when you're flying, that's when you look at maybe getting them replaced, send them into DJI, find a local repair place to replace the bearings on your motors. Let's see if I missed anything from a budgeting perspective. Okay, so with the budgeting of like 20 students with batteries, you know, in a given hour, these batteries, especially if you're doing like a DIY drone, you're going to get anywhere from 5 minutes with a racing drone to 45 minutes with a like traditional, just like Phantom style drone. So I would just take how long you want each students to fly per setting times how many students you have, and then double that so you have backups. Because again, if you don't use these batteries, you're going to use up your first set of batteries. So the backup set of batteries doesn't go to waste. If you keep them in storage mode, they'll still be perfectly good, even if you don't use them. Or you can use them all at the same time and get your overall spread of batteries to maintain more more longevity, last longer. If you only can buy them like once per year, you know, having as many batteries as you need to have your backups and your primaries. And so that's really my presentation.
You have covered so much, Evan. As
I know it's a lot.
It's
I know it's
amazing.
a lot. I'm trying to read through.
It's amazing. And again, I just want to remind everyone that's listening, we are recording this, so it will be available to you on our website within about 2 weeks. We have it placed on the northtexasuas.com. But I also want to mention to the audience that there is a lot of information and there's a lot of updates. One of the questions in the audience was resources, you know, how do you keep up with all the new rulings and such? I suggested the FAST team, the FAAsafety.com, but do you have any other suggestions, Evan?
For keeping up with
keeping up with the regulations, the new things that are going on, if there is considerations for like the TFR and such.
What I would do is, you know, looking at Facebook group, a lot of professional UAS groups on Facebook, what is the one that you use, Maggie? On
are you talking about the AUVSI? Are you talking about
AUVSI, Twitter?
Yeah,
FAA has a Twitter that you can look at when they post things. You can also go to the websites. It's a governmental agency, so there is a page on the FAA that you can look at that every time a new proposal is posted within the rulemaking committee, it'll be there. Even if it's way in advance or it's still got to go through a long process, it'll be there and you can read it over. And so just check it periodically.
Right, and if you sign up, I put in the notes too, or the chat, if you sign up with the FAA safety.gov, they will actually send you updated emails if you put that option. So anytime something's changed, you'll actually get an email for it. But I also want to emphasize, as a teacher, if you're starting a program, the resources are, of course, the North Texas UAS Task Force. Contact us, and Ernest or Jeff, maybe they can put you in touch. We've got such an amazing networking. We can put you in touch with maybe somebody that can, volunteer and give you some advice. I think AUVSI, the Lone Star chapter, I know that they have a lot of volunteers that will take the time to explain things like Evan. Evan is always available if I'm just volunteering you, Evan.
Yeah,
but
no, contact me. I'll be happy to answer questions. If you have questions.
Don't be shy. And then of course we've got our panelists, and reach out to some of the educators here or in another location. And by the way, AUVSI is not only in Texas. I mean, I think everyone is aware that they're everywhere. So just look for your chapter. In the FAST team, there's also advisors on the FAST team, and they're so role is to educate, be public awareness and education for that area. They're also a great resource. So there's a lot out there. If you have any questions on maintenance, just in our area, like I had said, one of our main sponsors is Drone Plus. They're great about helping you understand the batteries and also your equipment. So if something breaks and you just don't know how to repair it, go to Drone Plus, and they're great customer service there. So shout out to Drone Plus, shout out to AUVSI, shout out to Fox Fury. If you ever have any instructions or missions that you're going to be flying at night, which is really neat now that we can do that. Fox Fury has some amazing lighting. So, look at Fox Fury. Lens Pen, again, is one of our sponsors, and they're amazing because they have designed and developed actual pens that you can take on location and clean your lens, because obviously if you don't have a clean lens, it really disrupts what you can see. So I wanted to shout out specifically to them. And then we've got Chariot is also another one of our sponsors that have service and solutions. So amazing presentation today. I would encourage you to fill out that survey so we know where we're going, what we're doing. If we need to improve on something, want to hear that. Bad news, good news, we all want to hear how we're doing so that we can again improve month by month with our workshops. And by the way, our next workshop is going to be on drone sports. And we have a representative from our Dallas drone racing team. He's going to be speaking. I'm so excited about that. And then we also have a new concept here in the US. It's called drone soccer. And Kyle Sanders from Colorado is going to be speaking in regards to the new leagues and how you can get involved. So we've got some really neat programs that are coming up. Again, if there's something that you would like to listen to, you'd like to have some speakers refer to it, let us know. Interdrone is going to be here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, August 11th and 12th. Really want to talk about that. We have some just amazing resources to have that here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Women in Drones is one of the sponsors there, and we're having a career connect. So if you have any students that are looking for employment, please have them look into the Interdrone. It's called Career Connect. We're connecting companies with candidates. And so that's amazing, not just for employment, but for internships too. So keep that in mind. And with that, is there any other questions? If not, I know that I asked some of the panelists to stay with us, and I'd love to ask them questions, but first give the opportunity for our audience to have any questions. I know there was one question in the chat room that I don't think that we addressed yet, and that was, and this would be for some of our panelists, about programming, certain programs, education programs that they recommend. So Scott, are you there, or Stevenson, do you mind?
Yeah,
or Laquanda, do you mind addressing that?
Yeah, again, at our age group, we're using visual-based programming languages. We're not, the text-based is more for the creation, and we're more about observation and doing. So the visual-based programming, like a Blockly, works very well for us
Okay,
at that age
great.
group.
Great. What about you, Stevenson? Or Laquanda? Or anyone? It's okay. It's okay.
I hung around.
With all the great information that Evan ended with, Scott, is there anything that you want to emphasize or add to?
Yeah, Evans was much more aged up than we are. I just think that some of the principles, though, translate down to the younger age groups in terms of safety, equipment, battery usage and handling, really important with the kids, especially when you're dealing with the smaller drones. They cycle through them in 10 minutes.
Yeah,
So, in
I
our
agree.
program, and some of the things he talked about were engaging roles. We have PICs, observers, safeties in our program, and we rotate the children through those roles so they're actually engaged in real world drone scenarios. So I saw a lot of analogs from the older groups to the younger students that you can translate. Make sure your curriculum, you don't want to burden the young children with that stuff too much at an early age. You want to
Right.
engage them and have fun. But at the same time, you want to use that as an opportunity to introduce those concepts of safety. And, one of the things we teach our kids is young, it's a tool, not a toy. And that's critical because this can be overlooked as a toy. And in fact, it's your tool. So that's what we drill into them at a very young age.
I agree, and I think, and I can speak for Evan. A lot of that information that he gave was for the administration and the teachers. Those are the considerations they have to put in place so that it is a safe environment.
Yep.
So yeah, I think a lot of that is. But I agree with you. I mean, it's wonderful to have a program like yours, Scott, where you bring it down to the students level so that they can comprehend. And as everyone knows, children, along with some adults, have a short attention span.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to engage them and to have a program specifically with them.
Great.
Stevenson, are you still there? Or Laquanda? I know a lot of people had to leave, so I feel really bad, but that's, we try to stay on a schedule and everything like that, but this is such great information that I know that sometimes there's, more questions or comments. Evan, did you want to add anything to your presentation, or Sharon? I know that Ken Berry had to leave from SMU. I want to emphasize that please go on to our NorthTexasUAS.com where you registered for the workshop, because we're going to have all the listings of the presenters along with Evan and Sharon and myself, contact information, along with Ernest Huffman, who is head of the North Texas Council of Governments and is also in charge of this. So we wouldn't have this without our sponsors, without North Texas UAS. So I really wanted to thank them again, and hope that we see everyone at Interdrone. That would be amazing. And hope to see some of some of the audience repeat and come back and learn about drone racing. I'm enthralled with it, along with this drone soccer. I mean, this is a new concept that I understand is huge in Korea. And so they're bringing it here to the US. So that's just another way of getting children excited about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So is there anyone that wants to chime in and have a closing comments? If not, we're going to be ending really soon. And boy, I really appreciate our panelists and also Ken Berry for taking the time, coming here on a Saturday, your day off. I know that most of you work from Monday through Friday just teaching, so coming on a Saturday is much appreciated, really.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for
yeah,
having us.
you.
Thank you for
Yeah,
having me. Appreciate it.
absolutely. And if anybody wants to unmute and ask another question, or if some of our coordinators here for our workshop want to say anything, please feel free.
Somebody had asked about the Arise Drones website. When Ken was speaking, Arise,
Okay.
I think it was Keith. Keith asked, we're in the process of, we've secured the domain Arise. I'm on the board with
Oh, okay,
Sharon
great.
and Ken. And so we've secured the domain arisedrones.org. We're now in the process of getting the website up and developed. So stay tuned for that, arisedrones.org. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I put my link in here, and I'll just keep people updated, but we'll make an announcement when that website goes live.
Yeah, that's a really good idea about connecting with you and the other presenters on LinkedIn, along with myself, Sharon, and Evan. We try to stay updated on this. I'm conducting a club. I don't know if you're familiar with Clubhouse. Clubhouse is a new platform, but every Friday I also have a room specifically on drone and STEAM education. And so we have a lot of people, not just here in the US, but outside in Europe and all over the world, about some ideas of what we're doing. And also Women in Drones, they have a fireside chat in South Africa, and there was a really good segment on what they're doing in Africa. And so that's also recorded. If you're a member of Women in Drones, go on to their website and check that out. That was a really informative education that you can apply anywhere. I know that there's another platform that's called She Maps from Australia. There's a lot out there.
There's a lot out there,
yeah,
a tremendous amount.
Exactly. Just find what fits in your in your school. But one of the things, if you don't mind, before closing, I know I'm rambling, but one of the things we really have not addressed is, Scott, can you give us a perspective of, hey, I really want to do a drone a drone education program, and my administration thinks it's a great idea, but we don't have any funding. Where would a teacher or administration look for funding? I mean, how do they even start?
Well, I mean, that's grants. Now you're talking about educational grants. Sometimes you can pull it in. So a lot of times we'll utilize professional development budgets because we do offer a very rigorous PD program alongside. It's bundled with our package. Technology budgets. You can draw from the technology budgets, grants for STEAM and grants for STEM, those types of things. And then to your last point, there's a lot of free. It doesn't have to be, our program is for profit, but we're also running this summer. Last year, in collaboration with the World of Drones and Robotics Congress out of Brisbane, Dr. Catherine Ball's group, we participated. Drone Legends represented the US in their International Design a Drone competition. This summer, Drone Legends is running it in collaboration with the International World of Drones and Robotics Congress. It's free. It does not require a drone. The challenge is this: design a drone that solves a world problem. And it's from K through 12, and we'll have categories in each. And basically they can make it out of cardboard. They can draw it. It can be done on CAD. It can be a Shark Tank type video where you're pitching your concept, and we'll pick a winner. It's a summer program that anybody can participate in. It's going to be open internationally. And it's a great way to get kids thinking about designing a drone. It's a great summer activity when they're kind of out. It's not a screen-based activity because it's very creative in process. So they work backwards from a problem, and we'll be kicking that off. Again, follow me on LinkedIn. Visit my website. We'll have announcements when we launch that. We'll be doing a kickoff webinar that will open up the program probably in the beginning of June, and then we'll be judging the entries by the end of August.
That sounds like an exciting idea and program,
right?
And it's free. We always love that.
It's free, and it doesn't require a drone, so they just got to put one together.
That's great. And there's another suggestion is look to your community, because there are companies, technical companies, or clubs, organizations like a women's club or something like that, or the Rotary clubs. They're looking to help the community and reach out to them and say, hey, I really want to put a drone program here at the school, but we don't have the funding. Will you sponsor it? And we can, like Scott's program, or any other any other scholar program can kind of give you an idea of, okay, pick out the program that you want, find out what the cost is, find out, how many students you want to get involved, then bring it to the organization, the clubs, or the company in your community and present it. I mean, it's a great way. And I'm going to tell you, companies are pretty open when it comes to that. Sometimes they require you to do it in the beginning of the year, but so do schools. So, work on it in the summer and have it all prepared. But that's just another idea. But again, I really appreciate your input. I really don't see anything in the chat right now, Scott. So I am going to thank you
They're
again.
dropping off. I think it's time to get their Saturdays going.
I know.
So thank
Well,
you for having me. I appreciate your time today, everybody.
Absolutely. And again, thank you so much. And we're going to go ahead and close in 10 seconds.
All right.
So thanks
Take care.
again, Scott.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thanks again. I appreciate it and hope to see you next month.